And we're sort of live, but I'm doing it in private mode. Right, and see how we go. So, there we go, folks. I've got to remember to do the situational row. And that is, let's explain that because it was on the graphic here. And I've done half of the graphic, but not this bit. So, what I can do is I can put it both of them on for the extrovert and the introvert. Although last time I didn't do that. I think I'll go back a little bit and show the default operating mode for the extrovert because we've already done the introvert. And so I will try and make that a bit bigger. Still a bit small, so I will just read through this for people because they might be watching on a mobile device. Yeah, default operating. That's the same as before. In earlier versions, I called this consciousness, then cognizance. Then I realized that FI is more than just being cognizant of FI. It's about how it operates in the individual. In some thoughts, there might be much FI to be cognizant of. Also, FE is more about paying attention to someone else's feeling state. It's not just consciousness. It's like when you see it in the behaviors of the FJs. It's not just being aware of FE information. Because I would say that INTPs, especially when they get over about 24, and increasingly they become more aware of FE stuff, but they're not very good at then doing the FE things that come so naturally to, say, FE DOMs.
Yeah.
But they can read it. It's like, so they can read someone's state, but they don't know what to do with that. It's like, okay, I see this person's uncomfortable, but I don't know how to make them more comfortable.
It's like going from like are you trying to communicate that it's more than passivity? It's like an active stance.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like that's why I'm going away from, again, operating mode to actively implement the function, which is why, interestingly, Vanderhoop at one point, he did mention functions, but he kept referring to them as modes of adaptation. And again, thinking of them as mental verbs, but they can have those correlates on, say, the social plane. And so SFJs in particular tend to do like actively provide and care for people, and the NFJs, it's more for someone's mental health. They'll do it because that lines up with their idealist temperament. Default operating mode in the extrovert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing, externalizing. And Alfred Benny used the term externospection. So it's just to show that there was, he did ever mention that, Carl Jung, about Benny. Maybe there was a little bit of a contretemps between the two of them. Maybe they didn't get on. Default, as in defaults to, i.e. prefers. One's experience of default mode is more nuanced and practiced than one's situational mode. For extroverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. Yes, you're going to get some extra stuff now that I didn't cover in the other one. The default mode is extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e., and then I give some examples. Directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data such as immediate sensory instinctual data. So they're action in the world. It's not just sensory acuity. And then there's sensory instinctual data. Asterisk. And then instinctum. But I'm going to really magnify this for folks. Because when people read Dario Nardi's and Linda Behrens' definition of SE and SI, what they've effectively done is, because they know temperament so well, Kersey temperament so well, their definition of SE in reality is like taking the artisan temperament and turning it into a function. And the same with Guardians, and turning it into a function. And as I said before, Dario calls his SI chapter maybe something like magic for cautious protectors. And it's like, that's your temperament, cautious protector. And so I know I've mentioned this to you before, but it's a high horse of mine. It's like, so Dario and Linda Behrens are defining SE and SI as almost like the essence of artisans and guardians, respectively. And so then it's like, well, if you're naming it after the temperament and it's more than just sensing, then really it's the instinct of the temperament. And it was Vanderhoek that used that word instinct. Instincting, disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spiders, snakes, etc. shows the sensory is bound up with the emotional reactions and impulse to habit or impactful action. Kurz's artisans, SE wheelhouse, seek stimulation and are audacious and adaptable. See there? These are intrinsic features of it, but it's more than what we would get to if we were to use pure deduction. Like if you were teaching somebody this and they didn't know anything, and you gave them a definition of sensing and you gave them a definition of extroverting, and they put those two concepts together, they would not be able to deduce the instincts. It's a separate factor. Now, Kersey captured it because he wasn't using functions, and Behrens of Nardia captured it because they used functions in the context of temperament. I mean, Linda Behrens originally called her business the Temperament Research Institute, or that's what it was listed at the bottom of certain books, and I assume that's what she called a business at the time. So artisans seek stimulation and are audacious and adaptable. And so what Behrens and Nardi did, and what I do, is we then assume that seeking of stimulation and audacity is then part of the SE. Just as cautiousness is part of SI. See Chapter 2 of Vanderhoek's Conscious Orientation, 1939. And then here, some sort of like, because you like this, you like the science, there's some correlates to it. Limbic system reacts to sensory input before it reaches the neocortices, the sphere of feeling and thought. Latter includes perception and recognition. This is our evolutionary heritage. I'll show a bit of that in a moment. Actually, I'll do it now. I'll just because there's a bit sensory instinctual. Did that bit before? Oh yeah. I'll put that bit on there for the other bits for folks. I'll just do that whilst I just gotta put that graphic in. Right, so any comments? So Alexis, could you fill some time while I find this file?
Hilarious. Okay, so my question is, with Kersey's temperament, so he split them into SJs and SPs, and those make sense to me because they're sharing, like the SJs have SI, the SPs have SE. What still just hasn't clicked for me is why NTs would then be a group. I see that they have a lot of things in common, but do you think the NTs have more in common than, say, if NJs had been a grouping or NPs had been a grouping?
Well, Dario later did a series of 4 events where we went SJ, SP, NJ, and NP. But I have an explanation from Dario. And after a few years, he let me make it public, and I'll just find that. I've just got to go to a certain folder.
No, that's fine.
Right, because I've got your folders there in this event. So hopefully I've got your seal of approval for these little digressions, because, well, this second one, you've actually asked about it. So, you know, that's on you. Right. Right. Jungian compatible. That's not right. That's the event prep. Yeah, so if you could just fill for a little bit without asking me a question, it will help me to find the files, because I can only do one thing at a time. ADHD and male. I can only do one thing at a time. Right.
You know what I want to do at some point? Well, you know, it's hard for me to fill time without asking questions. But what I want to do some point, I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a tri-type test by Catherine Favre. I don't know how you say her last name.
Yes, I've done a lot of videos with her.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Well,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so she has a section in that test where it's you rank these kind of visuals. Are you familiar with that part of the test? It's like these cards where, and
Yeah.
it's, yeah, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. The NEA cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make something like that for Myers-Briggs.
We can talk about that off air.
Yeah.
There's a particular issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was just
Right.
thinking, like, I think what's helpful about, I mean, there are limitations to visuals, given that you're somewhat relying on stereotyping. But what's helpful about it is, I think, if people interpret words differently, it makes it very obvious. And
There's a bit of an issue there in that Catherine's very good on the data. I personally think she's ENTJ. Now, she's already admitted to ADHD and she's mentioned ADHD, and so I think that that's why she thinks she's an ENTP. Because if you're an ENTJ with ADHD, you're gonna score. There's a likelihood you're gonna score as ENTP. And so she always talks about the data. And one of the things she did is that those collages that she did, some of the people that she know, they sort of chose the images that were meaningful to them rather than just her picking them out. The issue then becomes, if you were to do the equivalent, you're going to have to clear all the copyright on the images.
you're right.
Right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, because I'm trying to find the other one. I can't remember what the first. Oh yes, what was the first thing I was going to show? Right. Okay. I'm going to show you this. This is the explanation of why it's split the way it is. And then I'm going to find the one on the instinct and the brain. Oh, okay. Now, I would argue that to add to this, that what we see at the whole type level is that the abstract types do more interpretation. And so the nature of that interpretation, and so because they do more interpretation, it's then more important is that interpretation, and that interpretation will be with a judging function, and then it's going to be, is that interpretation with thinking or with feeling? Whereas for perceiving types, not perceiving types, for concrete types rather, there's less interpretation because they're concrete. I mean, is that a reasonable premise that the more abstract types, because they are more abstract, they're going to extrapolate more from the information coming in, interpret it more, because usually that's what concrete types will complain about. Abstract types, they'll say you're reading too much into it. So
I think that part's a fair claim. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so for the concrete types, it's not about the interpretation, which would be thinking, feeling, because like where you bring the judging functions in, I think it's where it's then about the nature of the actual, the nature of the irrational function, whether it is SE or SI. But, and also another thing is that we can say is that I think it's not the case that I don't believe that abstract types do intuiting as much as concrete types do sensing. So, because nearly everyone is doing sensing most of the time. And I mean, especially, I mean, unless the sort of the, I mean, people, I mean, NI DOMs can get themselves into that state where they're doing a lot of NI if they like completely seclude themselves and really go inwards. But like but for as like I mentioned last time, the social field, how much opportunity do they get to then do that and live in that function? Whereas a
There's much
TE
less
dom,
opportunity.
yeah, there's a TE dom could live in TE most of the day with a bit of FE coming in. But you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
the social and how long you and the balance between, and because the sensing is fundamental to everybody. So is this a reasonable enough explanation that for concrete types, the type of instinct is more important than the type of intuition?
I don't know. I
But
don't
again,
know.
that's if you're trying to, again, if you're trying to come up with a functional explanation for why the temperaments are the way that they are. But again, we might just replace that with eliminate sensing and say for instincting types. It's just that the difference in instinct is so important, massive, and this is why to me it is so noticeable. The difference between guardians and artisans. You see it in movies, especially cop shows. You've got the by the book guardian, the attention to details, and then you've got the artisan who'll go against the rules and get fired. I want your badge and your gun. All of these things that just come up, and it's like they're just so noticeable. And it's like artisan, guardian. Even if you get someone acting guardian, they'll do it in an artisan way. Or if you've got someone acting, even if you've got a guardian doing a little bit of tactics because they've do experience, they've picked up some tricks, they'll still do other things. They'll do it by the book in like the tactics that they've picked up. Oh, I read a book on being shifty on tactics. So it just comes through. Once you notice it, it's once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's one of those. It's just so, and it's so important because it's like, in my opinion, 90% of people are concrete types. I think that abstract types are overrepresented. I think it depends on a lot of it is on the organizations in which people are being tested, and I think, and if they're tested at say school, I think the environment of the school is making them a bit more abstract. It's just that if you think of your relatives, and I just think it's that people in different jobs get tested more than others. People in more of the manual kind of job aren't being tested with the MBTI as much. So, yeah, I just think it's overrepresented.
Interesting.
So
do you think? So you think it's better to group, let's say, an INTJ and an INTP in the same temperament better than an INTP and an INFP?
Yeah, so basically you're putting NT before NTNF over MP MP versus NJ. Yes, because one of the things is if we go to, now there are extremes of that, but generally it's about the essential motivator pattern, in that INTJ and INTP both are rational, and so they're a little bit five-ish. Even ENTPs and ENTJs are a little bit five-ish. There's a little bit of five in there, even if they haven't got it in the trifix or tri-type, trademark Catherine Farver. Yeah. So I got to get onto this little bit about the graph, where I put it. That's it. Right. So books. There. Wait, mind and brain. Is that it? Come on, you so and so. Right. And I've got something here for you as well that sort of shows the importance of this. And so, also with instincting, that making that distinction between emotion and feeling, interesting. Makes it a little bit complicated, but interesting. So here's an example. Here's an example of what's actually happened when the limbic system gets disconnected from the posh part of the brain, the sophisticated part of the brain, the cerebral part. So I will zoom in. The limbic system has strong connections to the frontal lobes. And so both, actually it was George Binney Dibley who related the limbic system to instinct. He called it the optic thalamus, but the thalamus is in there. The limbic system has strong connections to the frontal lobes. When these connections are damaged, people may show surprisingly little intellectual impairment, yet their personal, social, and professional lives fall apart. The problem lies in their decision making. Faced with a problem requiring a decision, they analyze and evaluate all the alternatives, often at excessive length, and finally make their choice for irrelevant reasons. Take the example of a patient asked on which date to see his doctor. Now, this is a little bit like an extreme ENTP in that they don't know how they feel. And it's like, do you prefer this Friday or the next? Well, that depends. This Friday I might be busy. Let's see. Well, then next Friday, what will happen to it? It's like, because they're not getting a gut feeling of course, it would be easier if I went town this Friday. And look at the body language. And I suppose it's snowing again. I won't use the car. Look, we're making this Friday, okay? Sure, that's fine. Right. They could talk rationally, distinguish what is socially acceptable or not, but they do not seem to feel their own emotional assessments at a gut level. They might even remark that although they know what they should be feeling, they do not consciously have the feelings. And I've heard an ENTP talk about that, where he actually said, well, what do you think? And it's like, they're not, whereas INFP and ISFP have got a fine gradations of how they feel about things. It's like the equivalent of the nuances that you can get in INTPs. It's like that lead function is the most nuanced function. Although the NI-DOM still can't explain it. But it'd probably come out in the correlated social role. So that would, so for example, although it's hard for the NI-DOM to explain the nuances of NI, the NFJ can explain the nuances of mentoring, and the NTJ can show in the nuances of their coordination. But it usually has to be paired with another function that's easy to see. Study of such people has made it clear that emotions are an important part of normal reasoning and decision making. Again, this goes that dichotomy of thinking, feeling, not really a dichotomy. When a normal person faces a problem, he or she simply will not bother to consider many of the possible solutions. Only possible solutions that have the right feel about them get chosen for conscious consideration. So hopefully you're going to give me like an extra 20 minutes because like, it should be a high quality digression.
Just giving you a time limit last time really must have been traumatic.
Yes. SE Polar, remember? SE Achilles heel. Trivial problems. So I've not got a time limit this time. I've got, but keep it under 2 hours, Ben. Is that basically it?
2 hours. What if we do like an hour and a half? The only reason being is my husband's schedules and I's today are not overlapping with today. So
Okay. Trivial problems are not endlessly standardized because they're just not worth the cost of prolonged soul searching. That's the thing. ENTPs don't do soul searching. Neither do ESTPs. Not self-reflective. This is why ENTP Douglas Adams was not very good at characterization. Right? He had fantastic ideas. I don't know if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Right, when Melvin Bragg in 1992 said to him, "Isn't Arthur Dent a bit of a stereotype?" He says, "Oh, of course." And it's like, it's not interested in the characters. I'm interested in the ideas. And it's like ENTP just blatant about it. Because they're just not worth the cost of prolonged soul searching. People with damage to those areas of the frontal lobes that receive limbic input appear to lose this emotional guidance of their thought processes. So, Angus Gillespie. And then he went on and did a proper cog sci book. So if you really want to get into functions, now I've got the books, but I've not read them properly. Cognitive psychology is the way to go because it's like the functions in reality with experiment, cognitive psychology. And that will explain the difference between perception and sensor. Right. Here we go. And so this is a little bit of stuff on instinct, on Vanderhoop, and it's like why I think he's got it right. And again, it correlates with Kersey as well. The human forebrain contains a large number of important structures. The thalamus is a kind of communication center which receives input from the eyes, ears, skin, and other sensory organs. And it actually receives it, and people can react to that information before it gets to the cerebral cortices, the posh part of the brain. It's a kind of communication center where it receives input from the sensory organs. It also modulates activity in the cortex as a whole. The hypothalamus is a small but very complex structure engaged in the control of the 4 F's. Feeding, fighting, fleeing, and fornication, as well as of temperature control, sleep, and the expression of emotion. So it's put emotion, rather than Dario that's picking up in the cerebral cortex. Says that this complex relationship between emotion, which I see as more primitive, and let's say that dogs have emotions but not feelings, although some dog owners, guardians, might disagree with me, because there is that movement now for dog owners to call themselves guardians. Right. Dog guardians. I'm not an owner. How dare you? I love tiddles. Now, hypothalamus, thalamus, and then a bit more. The limbic system began as a smell brain and is heavily involved in emotional processes. Yes. Very evocative memories can be linked to smell because it's next to it. The olfactory bulb is not far away. Began as a small brain and is heavily involved in emotional processes. The hippocampus in the limbic system is essential for knowledge about the spatial layout of the environment. There we go. It may be here that emotions and memories compete with present circumstances and thoughts for control of behavior. Now, have I got another bit? Yes, the key bit. Where did it go? There it is. It's out of sequence. Right. This is a bit with... this is sort of relevant. The other one gets better, but I think this is... Old book. I don't know if you get away with this now. If a tiny lesion is now made in a certain region of the animal's hypothalamus, its heart rate no longer shoots up when the tone sounds, but it still stops pressing the lever. The lesion abolishes one expression of learnt fear, but not the other. Yet if the animal receives another shock without the tone, then it still shows both unlearnt heart rate change and an unlearnt suppression of lever pressure. So different expressions of learnt fear depend on different brain circuits. And for heart rate change, different circuits carry the learnt and the unlearnt fears. This may seem complicated. It is complicated. It is also characteristic of the complex relationships between brain and behavior, or brain and mind. We will encounter many more examples of this sort. Here is another one relating to the emotion of fear. Now, this is very important, and I think this is a feature of instinct and SE in particular, where people can react quicker than they can think because it's subcortical reactions. And again, these are the neocortices. Information from the eyes and ears travels first to the thalamus. That's where Dibley, George Binney Dibley, said was the seat of instinct. Follows first to the thalamus, and from there to the visual and auditory areas of the cortex. So then go into like the posh part of the brain. But it goes to the thalamus first. It used to be thought that sight and sounds were first experienced and recognized in these cortical areas. Information about what had been recognized was then supposedly sent to the limbic system for an emotional reaction. Is it good or bad? It has been discovered, however, that in addition to this indirect route, thalamus, cortex, amygdala, there is a direct route from the thalamus to the amygdala. So information comes in and you get an emotional response to it before it gets to the sophisticated part of the brain. In other words, the amygdala, part of the limbic system, responds emotionally to objects in the world even before the cortex has experienced and recognized them. So there's some evidence here in the brain of a distinction and complicated relationship between emotion and feeling. And it's not just that emotion and feeling are synonyms of each other. The question then is how to divide an emotion and feeling. And Vanderhoek would say something like, to distinguish between lust and love, between anger and indignation. And he would say that many times a feeling state was composed of multiple emotions, and then maybe the way you think about those emotions then will color the feeling state as well. And he gave an example that you're walking down the street, you may be in a crowd, someone bumps into you, you have that initial emotional reaction, you see it's an old person. That then colors the feeling that you have. Or you see that it's a small child that has bumped into you, and that becomes a more complex internal experience. And he thinks there, and he would always talk about spheres of functions, that like you may have moved from the sphere of emotion into the sphere of feeling, which is more complex, more cerebral. Is there any more? Fight or flight response. Heart rate and blood pressure increase. Large muscles prepare for quick action. And again, this is why I think instinct and the way artisans are wired, this is exciting for them. These kind of like high pressure, like it's like they're getting amped up, stimulation and what more. And so it goes towards sort of tribal roles of the warrior, and then the person who's more procedural, more the farmer, the gatherer kind of, these kind of ancient roles that are sort of hardwired into us. And same like fears of spiders and snakes. I have those fears. So that's a bit on instinct. Getting back to extroverting, which was itself a digression, but then I'll get back to wait a minute, there's a bit more. Other kinds of extroverting. So we did the sensory instinctual data stuff, social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions, and tone of voice signifying feelings. So I put that under FE. Facts, numbers, practical application, TE. The world as possibilities, connections between ideas, situations that can be articulated, debated. I say that's NE. If you can talk about the connection, discuss the connection, whereas UNI is like, well, I just know. Okay. So that's why it's more, because it's hard to distinguish, to make that, to go how it's empirical. Like we can discuss the connections because they are. And again, perception. Oh yeah, okay. BV subjectify, elaborating, Darionard is 8 keys of self-leadership. Extroverts are comfortable doing many extroverted activities. The Jungian cognitive function is slot 1, best, 3, well, 5, well enough, gets by with development. Okay, so what I'm probably saying something like best, well, okay, like because it's practice and preference come in. It's a bit more on Jung on extroversion. With this concept, I denote a manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of a positive movement of subjective interest towards the object. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed and of a passive extroversion when the object compels it, i.e. attracts the interest of the subject of its own accord, even against... Now, I would maintain that an introvert might do more passive extroversion than active extroversion, because it's like it's something that has grabbed the attention of the introvert outside of their natural sort of like predisposition to introvert. Again, passive active, even against the latter's intention. Should the state of extroversion become habitual, the extroverted type appears. Now, interesting way that Jung has phrased that, in that if someone does the activity, then I'm going to label it as an extroverted type, rather than someone being an introvert or an extrovert. It's an interesting way of phrasing it. Should it become habitual? So it's almost like saying, it's almost like you could discuss it with a fellow colleague, and he would say, well, I'm not saying introverts or extroverts exist. It's just that if this person over there does a lot of extroverting, I'm going to label them as an extrovert because their extroverting is habitual. And it's like, then it would have to be, you would have to argue against the behavior rather than having a debate about what's going on inside someone's mind.
Right.
So there's an interest, and that level of that shows there's little things in here that come from Jung every now and then that sort of show his carefulness, but then he forgets about them and then he just becomes sloppy. Because it would be a pain in the backside to keep doing it. So now we're back on to the situational row. Oh no! I've been doing the default row. I should have been doing the situational row. I've been doing the wrong graphical this time. Oh no! No, actually, that's not right, because I did want to show the other one. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yes, that was an extra digression. Right. So now we're going to do the extrovert. Now we're going to do the situational extrovert and then situational introverting of it. So that was right. It's because it did give you extra information. Because I was under the gun last time. Right. I'm not going to let it lie. Right. Situational row. Situational operating mode. Situational operating mode in the extrovert is introverting, i.e. subjectifying, internalizing. And then I give some examples of when the extrovert will introvert. And then we can discuss this. SI is not as internal as the other introverting functions. However, certain subfunctions are, e.g. SI imaginative, sensory imagination, and SI harmonizing internal bodily harmony. For extroverting types, the situational operating mode is introverting because their default is extroverting. Now here we go. Yes, I added quite a bit here about a distinction between this and model G. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's model G, the situational row is less specific. So for example, in model G, Victor's model teaches that the introvert only extroverts when the introvert is on its territory. Like me in this event, talking about something that I'm interested in. But I think that the introvert can be forced to extrovert, and the situation determines that. And that's why I give that example of Vanderhoop on the horse. The situation demanded that he pay attention to what he was doing. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g., the ENTP resembler Wilma Twen Lee in my stage play, Woman Wilma, on Lulu.com, is introverting as she prays and reflects in soliloquy, but that's beside the point. And it is whilst she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite vertness to the type, e.g., situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert. So these two profiles, I have different explanations in this column, depending on whether it's an introverted profile or an extroverted profile, just in order to fit more in. Which draw on opposite vertness of the type, e.g., situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert. And then we can discuss if this is accurate, because this is like semi-speculated by me. Such as when I use sort of introspective data for this. Such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, TI, consider how something might develop or have a moment of inspiration from within, NI, run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences, SI, as a way to interpret it, or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere, or in dilemma, where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity, and this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally, FI. Wrinkle, if a person thinks about its dilemma, TI will by definition also be involved. So does it make sense, and is it convincing about an extrovert might introvert in that way?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then in practice, a real person varies its degrees of extroverting and introverting. And then Jung on introversion. Well, we covered this before. I'll go quickly. Interest does not move towards the object, but recedes towards the subject. I can't do a Swiss accent. If I could, I would. Introverting, i.e. the state of introversion, means the subject person is more interested in its subjective experience than in the object or external stimulus, e.g. sound. It's not an object, but it can hold one's attention outside of oneself. Everyone whose attitude is introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates that the subject is the chief factor of motivation, while the object, or stimulus such as sound, at most receives only a secondary value. Telling, because it means actions and feelings, and a TI dome will often be subject. Oh yeah, so an example of sound, language. Listening to somebody, the attention, and then a whole lot of the brain is involved in.
Yeah.
Right, so now for the introverts. Now for the situational extroverting in the introvert. Because I recently went over this with somebody, and then before I get confused as to whether I have to manually check who have I told this to Alexis before. Probably not.
I know that's the thing, and then we've done stuff off air too.
Yes.
Before, and I'm like, I don't know.
Right. So situational operating mode in the introvert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing and externalizing. Now, compared to the personal and Victor Galenka's Model G, the situation is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the TNX resembler becoming I put a little bit of extra in there. The TINX resembler becoming more expressive when talking on its territory, e.g. about an interest, like this one here, or more open with feelings when talking to someone it has a good relationship with. However, situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, including cognitive functions, which are opposite vertness to the type, e.g., situations which draw on the extroverting functions of the introvert. For example, the psychiatrist J.H. van der Hoop, a TINX resembler trained by Jung, wrote in Conscious Orientation on page 24 about taking up horse riding again after a long interval. He stated that in order not to be thrown by the horse, his attention was riveted on the totality of my sense experience and my reactions to it. So he was in a state of SE, extroverting and instincting, because of the situation. In practice, a real person is best described as dynamically alternating between degrees of extroverting and introverting and moving along a vertness spectrum. This can be a moment-by-moment change. Also, a real person resembles rather than is a type, hence TINX resembler. In my humble opinion, even though a type resembler can do atypical things, they tend to do it in a typical way, e.g. a by-the-book SITX-like artist. Jung on extroversion, and then we'll get to the counter club. With this concept, I denote a manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of a positive movement of subjective interest towards the object. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed and of passive extroversion when the object compels it, i.e. attracts the interest of the subject of its own accord, even against the latter's intention. Should the state of extroversion become habitual, the extroverted type appears. So, any comments after that?
Oh, I mean, one thing I would just say is that it's very well researched, and a lot of what you say, it's hard to find fault with because you have such precise language. I don't know. I think TJs are a lot more sloppy. Like, it's hard to find fault with the wording, the definitions, the way you explain things. The question that just comes down to TE is like, how should we use it? Like, with this precise knowledge, what should we then do with it?
Yeah, I'll just give a little background to folks as to why it's come out the way it has. So I did the research. I looked at Jung, obviously reading Jung carefully, that bit at least, and those bits, and Van der Hoop. But also, this is like the tip of the iceberg because I did a lot of typewritten notes where I wrote out so it's going to be a quick one, folks, before I get back to it. Just for a minute, just to show the what I did, how I originally started the model. I'm just going to go to that semi-narcissist mode. Oh no, I have to go remove that and I'll put that back. There you go. So I originally started like that. There was not, and then I added these bits where each one of these box was like a whole sheet, and I'm sort of doing that now with the ESFJ profile. So when I would, and again, it's exploratory. And so all of that was sort of my thoughts on what to write for the extrovert, what to write for the introvert, what to do in all of that was for box B, like that little box there. right? And so exploring it, and so getting to a point where there is all this information, and then I can sort of boil it down, sort of doing the TI as I'm going through it, exploring it, seeing how it works out. And there's an example probably for another box. Yes, because each one of these sheets is for one little box on the graphic. So that would be box D, which is probably box D. What's box D? Is it that one? Anyway, you get the idea. Quite a bit of like these bits. I'm thinking about it. Right, and then sort of like, so it's like tip of the iceberg thing, and then trying to get it as clear as possible, because I'm so big on people understanding introverting and extroverting.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's an incredible amount of like ideating that I imagine to be a bunch of NE and then TI boiling it down. I think that's just so much work. I just think, I mean, I'm very impressed at the level of precision with word choice and boiling it down.
Well, thank you. I mean, part of it is like I also write, so there's my play. And Wilmer's Housemates should be out within a year, but also enjoying that the INTP likes to come up with theories and categorize and systematization and that lot. So probably got about an hour left. It's probably a little bit less, but I will try my best to get through it. And I'm gonna put that back, add the stream. Did you say I was okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry.
Right. Essie Pola, like right, anyway. So we've now covered all of this. Because like I said, you've not got a lot of room to work with. And so you need to sort of like do it first. And also doing it on a typewriter enables me to go forward and not sort of go with the flow a bit more. And also to avoid distractions. Social media, damn you.
That's a good idea, actually, for productivity. Are typewriters expensive? Or are they cheap?
If you want an old one, they've gone up in price because all the hipsters are out there getting them. It's like there's a documentary out there, California Typewriter. But yeah, you can try and get one. Yeah, they might. But yeah, I mean, they are good. Like especially if you want to like do it outside on a sunny day or something, and it's good if you want to go in the flow and not do much corrections, and you continually go forward and leave all the finessing for a later stage. Right, so Hot 4 B-side. So this is going to be your, FI and SE for INTJ. Functions in slot 5 and 6 are, so just to give people a little bit of context as to what the hell are we looking at, Ben? I feel lost. So these rows here, this row here, the Hot 4 B-side, the B-side of the personality, which I would say correlates to the soul image. I better I'll get a little bit on that because you are indulging me today. So I'll just say a little bit on the soul image. Because it's in a separate. Oh, I know. I remember now. It's not in that folder. It's in the Jungian folder, and it's in the Jung folder, and it's in the books on him folder. Not by him. Books on Jung. That one. Right. It gets a little bit controversial, this book, so I'll have to be careful. Right. So this correlates to the idea of the anima and the animus. Okay, so if I use that one, and that one, that should be okay. So this book's from the 90s. Right, so where are they? Oh, here they are. So that's the idea of the persona. So there was a book out there called She, written by H. Rider Haggard, and it was for ages, it was an extremely popular book. And Jung actually mentioned this book, and he thought that it was appealing to the anima in men. the female soul image. And so,
I'm a little unfamiliar with the concept of anima and animus.
well, I have a helpful graphic. But it gets a little bit controversial in the later parts about sexuality. So we'll have to gloss over that and have no comments. The unconscious side of the, because you know what YouTube's like. The unconscious side of the persona is the soul image. Jung sees the Latin male and female names of the soul, the animus and anima. The soul image is always represented by the individual's opposite gender. A man's soul image is female, the anima. The woman's soul image is male, the animus. The soul image is an archetype which can represent the whole of the unconscious. It is inherited, collective, and ageless. But it is modified by one's actual experience of the opposite sex, especially of parents. Soul images appear in dreams, myths, and fantasies, but they're also projected, giving a distorted impression of individuals of the opposite sex. Now, what I'm doing is I'm sort of lining up this idea with the idea of duality from Socionics, but Carl Jung also talked about complementary types that attracted each other, and even mentioned in his interview about an extrovert of instinctive type, well, he didn't say the proper word, and an introvert of intuiting type. So the anima. The male soul image has appeared in many forms throughout the ages, but always with the compelling and fascinating secret nature of Eros as an archetype of life itself, represented by images of earth and water, or a femme fatale luring him to his doom. She can appear light or dark, virgin or whore, a source of wisdom and muse. Blame your own repressed femininity, dear. Right, that's got a good joke. Now, this is controversial. I won't read it out. People can see what they can see. And there's more controversy over here because we know. So, for example, I'll get to that bit later on. Woman's soul image takes the nature of logos. Again, that only works if it's a feeling type female and the B side is logical. If you've got an INTP female, then her animus is not going to be logical. It would be feeling.
I see what you're building here. Okay.
Yeah. So it will vary by type. Because obviously there's no point in an INTP female or an INTJ female thinking in their animus. It needs to be the opposite side of their personality. It'll be more feeling and sensing.
It looks as if it's pretty much making synonyms like male with logos.
Yeah. And this book was written by a woman, Maggie Hyde, so you can blame her rather than the patriarchy.
I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that's
Maggie Hyde, and Michael McGuinness was the illustrator. All right. So the animus is projected onto men with whom she is emotionally involved. Father figures in a young woman, heroic men as she matures, comforting male figures like doctors and priests as she grows old. Now, this is where it gets controversial. Now, I think this is a picture of Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher was ENTJ. So, what we get in here is they are almost saying that an ENTJ female is an animus-dominated woman. But I would say that's a sort of a sexist, because it's saying that that's not a woman, that it's a woman that's dominated by the inside. Like, you see what I mean? It doesn't, because I think that's a sort of a sexist interpretation of that, because it's saying that this is sexist because it's stated that the Enneagram 8 is not really a female personality type. Although, although it does explain butch lesbians. Not all are butch. The disclaimer there. And then the soul Niger, I think I'll pronounce it as, because I think there's a place in Africa called that, a country. The soul Niger is prejudiced and unteachable as a blind alley. Yeah, Margaret Thatcher got quite stubborn towards the end. So I think that is a picture of Margaret Thatcher. I don't really want to, I could pull it up on Google, but it might be a copyrighted image. I think that's a picture of Margaret, because she was known for being stubborn. ENTJ Prime Minister. Right, anything else?
I'm not even understanding what they're interpreting with like the black sun. It's just this little racist section. What is this?
Yeah, it's an old book. I don't know why they've gone down that route. Maggie Hyde. Anyway, but then they sort of get it back with like the different. I mean, this book has not said all men are feelers. All men are thinkers. It's not like that. Because he actually shows an example of a strong. Anyway, the pairing of conscious persona and unconscious. But you see, Maggie Hyde was more of an astrologer. So the pairing of conscious persona and the it would be weird if in criticizing the book for being sexist, I was then sexist in criticizing Maggie Hyde. So I can't win. Right. So
no, you can criticize. No,
I was just saying that. I mean, what am I supposed to say? Oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about with all this sexism, and then I've criticized the female author. Right. So mixed types. So this matches up the idea of the B-side, the inferior function. So my complex equivalence is the inferior function equals the soul image. So the pairing of conscious persona and unconscious soul image is colored by the. Now Vanderhoek would say it depends, and so he's got that counter nucleus, and he would say when it's conscious, it's called a polarity, which is a different concept from polar in Socionics, which is short for place of least resistance. The conscious persona is based on the dominant attitude, e.g., extravert, Maggie, extravert, and superior function, e.g., feline. Hence, the unconscious soul image counterpart will be imagined along the lines of the opposite attitude and inferior function. So, NI done for you, then the inferior function should be SE. And so we've got here thinking persona, feeling soul image, intuitive persona, sensation soul image, feeling persona, thinking soul image, sensation persona, intuitive soul image. And then here, and yeah, Dario really loves SE. Like he's talked about, he does. A thinking type man cut off. He writes about the function it's like a love letter to SE. You should get that book. It's a love letter to SE. Read Dario's chapter on SE in 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. That little bit of cheekiness should get me out of trouble with him because I've endorsed his book. 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. Read his SE chapter. He reads about it in glowing terms. A thinking type man, cut off from the realm of feeling, may dream of mermaids, or he may project his unconscious, undifferentiated feeling function onto a feeling type woman with whom he falls in love. By embracing her, he indirectly embraces his own feeling nature. But as he becomes more aware of his unconscious feeling through the relationship, his anima image holds less fascination for him. His projection will be withdrawn and he falls out of love. As we go through life, it becomes less easy to fall in love in a romantic way, because in the process of self-development, we gradually integrate more and more of our unconscious contents.
It's kind of an interesting idea.
Yep. So these are more extreme people with the you've seen like extreme INTJs and INTPs out there, like just the younger. Anyway, going back to the B side. So I correlate the jewel with the idea of the soul image, and we've got the B side of the personality. And you see it when some people are like, I think you see it in a couple where they're both over 30. And you've got like, say, an ESFP that has this B side of interested in ideas. And then you've got an INTJ that likes to go out. And it's like where they're different halves rather than extremes. The functions in slots 5 and 6. 5 and 6. Wait a minute. 5 and 6. 5 and 6. The functions in slots 5 and 6 are weaker than 1 to 4, yet valued. Better use of these functions is respected in others. They can be a turn on. Is that fair enough, Alexis? You did marry an ISFP after all.
Married an ISFP. So this is saying, like, so for Garrett, ISFP I married. I like it when he uses NITEs, is what that's saying?
Well, no, it's saying that you like it when he's using his FE. Sorry, when he's using his SE and his FI. And that you balance each other out.
Oh, wait. So I like people's my own 5 and 6 functions, which are FI and SE, I like in other people.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. Again, it's the bit that's valued, it's B side, and like I said, better use of these functions is respected in others. The function in slot 6 and the function in slot 5 are respectively the dominant and the auxiliary function of this type. So that's one of the things I did in this model, is I wanted to keep the terms that people are familiar with: dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, inferior. So it gives them a sort of an anchor, sort of orientation points. The functions in slot 6 and 5 are respectively the dominant and auxiliary function of this type's dual. Right, so your dual would be ESFP. And again, your inferior is the ESFP is dominant. And your tertiary is the ESFP is auxiliary. So technically, you're in an activator relationship with your husband.
What do you mean by activator relationship?
It's a name of a relationship in Socionics that I've imported, and it's basically it's like your dual, but you flip the vertness so it's the same. So, for example,
is it called activator because you like activate like unknown things?
you activate each other, but it's sort of like, it's not from a function point of view. But in reality, like the idiosyncrasies of people sort of will come to a better, like all different types of relationships can work, depends on the individuals. And duality
not theoretically not necessarily compatible.
What's not compatible?
The activator relationship.
No, it is compatible. It's just not as good theoretically as the dual relationship, because theoretically INTJ likes SE a little bit more than FI. And ISFP likes TE a little bit more than NI. So theoretically, ENTJ would be the best fit for ISFP. The function slots are respectively the dominant and auxiliary of this type's dual. So that's the complementary opposite rather than the conflicting opposite. So your conflicting opposite would be ESFJ. And your complementary opposite is ESFP.
Yeah.
Same valued functions, the gamma functions. And you can tell Dario, those people out there who don't think Dario's an INTJ, buy his book 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, and you'll tell that he likes SE, FI, TE, and NI more than the other 4. All right, those are his favorites. Okay, e.g., INTP has inferior FE and tertiary SI, and its dual, ESFJ, FESX, has dominant FE and auxiliary SI. Idea imported from Socionics. Slots 6 and 5, so this basically that sum up of all that stuff I presented before. Slot 6 and 5 can also be seen as the function map of the Jungian soul image. Look up Anima Animus. This is the other, i.e. B side of the personality. Dario Nardi has mentioned his inner ESFP. So, which one should I do next? Well, I'm going to make sure I cover all these blocks. Oh, I better do these ones up here so I don't try and get too fancy. Yeah, I'll do. Do I mention slot 6? I mentioned slot 6 down there, but I'm bound to. Actually, I'm gonna stick to it. I'll end up forgetting it. I end up forgetting a box, and I'll be all annoyed, and I'll have to say, Alexis, can we do a third event, please? I missed the box out. Slot 5, dabbling tertiary, has low endurance, hence the name. The type has more short-lived, eyes bigger than its belly, motivation, than ability for this function. Overplays its moderate hand. It can come across as someone having pretensions for the function in slot 5, i.e. the person is not as good as at this function as it thinks it is, because the person does not fully commit to the function. It only dabbles in it unless there is a non-type factor to encourage its use, especially the requirements of someone's job. So, for example, say you have an INTJ that becomes a counsellor, then they might have to develop that FI. Victor Galenka's import. Beneficiary shift, i.e. shift by a type to acting like its beneficiary, e.g. INFJ acting like INTP, ENTJ acting like ESTP, INFP acting like ISFJ upon seeing physical suffering, INTJ acting like INFP when they all get talking about being authentic. I mean, INTJ can be the most authentic type, authentic to a fault. Have you been accused of being authentic to a fault?
I've had a lot of people call me authentic, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And also in the negative context, yes.
Yeah. You're a bit blunt, and I prefer the word authentic. Right, okay. I mentioned that. Oh, now we've got this one. We mustn't forget this box. Disdained. Disdained. That's that fourth column. That's
Disdain is a great word for it.
Thank you, because I went through. That's another thing with the preparation, going through the words that would like capture it and give it a little bit of flavor. So the disdained functions for all the types in ENFJ, TE and SI, in INFJ, SI and TE, in ENFP, SE and TI, in INFP, SE and TI, in your NTs. ENTJ does not like FE and SI. INTJ does not like FE and SI. ENTP does not like SE and FI. INTP does not like SE and FI. ESTP, they don't like INFPs. Bottom line. Double conflictors, don't like FI and NE. In other words, STPs don't like FI and NE. SFPs don't like NE and TI. I still have communication difficulties with Jeff, even though we've got a lot in common and we've done over 200 videos together. STJs do not like FE and NI, but with them being guardians, they want to belong, so they're going to do a little bit of FE. So they're not going to be as FE weak as the NTJs. That's my assertion. Also, there's loads of people that are like them. Like 50% of the population are guardians, so they're going to be able to like talk to them and communicate with each other. Whereas with the NTJs, they're different from most people. And then ESFJs don't like TE and NI. But again, temperament, good at logistics. Guardians are good at TE, that's the logistical kind of TE. Sort of your practical kind of beneficence, kind of like physical retail kind of stuff, more than your abstract kind of strategic TE that NTJs are good at. So, disdained row. Disdained SI and FE. Right. Although, if you're a mother, I don't know if you are a mother, but if you're a mother, you would be doing more SI, and that would be developed. And like Jeff has talked about that as well, like when he became a single father. Like, and he said that he was doing a lot of logistical stuff, that if you just looked at his behavior, you could mistake him for a guardian. But that was because of his situation, sort of forcing him to think about self-preservation stuff and thinking about his son.
Do you think, I heard that a lot of NTJs don't want to have kids? So do you think like this SI and
yeah, that's that part of SI about, yeah, I can believe that. Yeah. Anyway, so disdained. Functions in this column are the least valued. That's consistent with Dario's research. Like he would say least preferred, and it's consistent with classical socionics. The function in slot 7, so that's going to be what I call the contrarian alternative. Yeah, I came up with that phrase, and then I found out that it was a phrase in finance, although Peter Schiff didn't mention it, and I've been listening to him since 2009. He's a stockbroker, an economist. But I think that works, the contrarian alternative, and then it's like, it's the contrarian alternative of your NI. It's still an introverted irrational function. Right. The function in slot 7 is usually recognized. So here we go. This is one of these things that I spent quite a bit of time on and getting it precise and hopefully accurate. The function in slot 7 is usually recognized by the type as a weakness that can be worked on, albeit reluctantly. Degree of reluctance varies by type. This is my own assertion, based on my own observations. Degree of reluctance varies by type. E.g., FE DOMs keener to work on TE than SE DOMs to work on any. And I think that's because FE DOMs want to get with the group atmosphere, the group ethos. And if the group ethos is TE, then they want to fit in with the group and then develop their TE. So it's ironic that they're doing TE for FE reasons.
Right.
For certain narrow uses, and also...
Well, okay. If an FE user is doing TE for FE reasons, then are they really doing TE?
Yeah, and specifically it's FE DOMs. And I think because say ENFJ and INFJ, ENFJ has a load more energy than INFJ.
Mm-hmm.
Load more. And I think that it's TE in the sense of because again, it's a bit of a blend, because I think I mentioned before, you either somebody else or in a recent, about the amount of FE involved in business.
Yeah.
Customers always right, market research, all the focus on FE, customer loyalty, all of that. The 20% rule, which is I think like you get 80% of your business from 20% of your customers. And so, but the idea of, say, an ESFJ in a business meeting, and everyone's got their sort of business head on, and FE being so self-effacing, it's like, okay, this is what everybody else is doing. I want to fit in with them. So, and I think that is part of FE. Whereas FI might be like, no, I'm going to stick to my principles. So, say there's a TE practice. So, for example, there was a study. I can give you an example of a study that is an example of TE versus FI. So, in a car company, decades ago, they ran a study about the safety of a car, and they ran the numbers of, well, if we correct this fault, it will cost this amount of money. If we don't correct the fault, this number of people will die, and we'll lose this much in terms of being sued. And so they knew there was a fault with the car, and they didn't correct it. And I'm saying that an FI Dom is like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So that was a situation, because it's like with the cars, because they ran the numbers of how much would it cost to make this change to the car versus how much would we get sued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, okay, back to the other thing. So I can see, like, for example, my ISFJ mom, she knows that I like things efficient. So she's kind of learned to be efficient. It's like an FE reason. Like, she wants to do what I like, for example. But I'm wondering, is that my mom using TE, or is it her using FI and perhaps some SI mimicry?
Well, I'm going to have to ask you to explain that again, because as soon as you said that, my brain went, okay, so Alexis is going to have a little bit of extra FE and SI just because of her mother, and that she's been around those two functions when she grew up. So please make your point again. Now I'm concentrating.
No, you're fine. So my mom knows that I like things to be done efficiently. She just knows my TE preferences. I've taught her a little personality and just her being around me. So because she has FE, she has kind of like integrated that to her personality. But if she ever does TE things, don't you think that's still, like, let's say she runs an errand efficiently for my sake.
Yeah.
That efficiency is still just FE because she's still doing it for my sake.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's your motivators. Which is why Kersey comes into it. Like, if again, so from a Kersey point of view, let's see if this matches your mother. So she's naturally going to do these sort of providing roles, these beneficent roles, because like they're in line with, and it's good that you know interaction, in line with their informing interaction style. Whereas these monitoring roles are a little bit more directive. So I would say that your mother could do all four of these, and she does this best, this second, and that maybe that last, but she can do those, and she can maybe do those for FE reasons, because FE is the most self-effacing function, and especially ISFJ as a behind-the-scenes type, as an accommodator. They've frequently got a 9 in the tri-type. Pretty self-effacing, very self-effacing type. ISFJ. Very self-effacing.
Yeah.
So, and they can do the logistical TE, which is sort of as an overlap with SI, because there is that SI involved in it. Like, and I think they're doing it not because they enjoy it, but they're doing it because, again, motivators, security. They've got that driver towards security, because they're going to make sure the details are taken care of in order to ensure the security. Lock everything up, be aware of the neighborhood watch, all of these sort of things, and these self-preservation things. The motivation, the essential motivator pattern, to highly suggest that book by Dario, Magic Diamond, and Please Understand Me Too. Please Understand Me Too. Very good book. Anyhow, I've got to get a shift on. Right, so back to the this little box. So I think I answered the question. I don't know, maybe it's stop the clock when you're asked a question. Right. Anyway, so I'll go through a little bit more through this. There's some digression onto Socionics. For those who for certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. So, you can see. You probably can see that. You probably see the merits in all functions, but you see the merits in SI, don't you?
The merits in SI. I've called SI useless before.
Well, it fits.
I don't actually believe it's useless, but if I was going to pick a function to be useless, I'd pick SI.
Right. Okay. Again, contrarian alternative. For certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen, but can be, not will be, can be seen, even if the mother's ISFJ, can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. Hope you're listening.
Well, I also agree that NI is kind of useless.
Right.
But I disdain the uselessness of SI, right, whereas I enjoy the uselessness of NI.
Yeah, but I would say that if you correlate it like with the two intelligent social roles, NI with TE, you get the coordinating of resources towards long-term objective, that good strategic planning, where you're using the intuition of development part of, that's what I call the intuition of time, intuition of development, because that's really what it's going on, developing these long-term projects. NTJs with objects, NFJs with people. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. It represents the other side of the mindset of the type, e.g., the mindset of INTP, TINX, is called balanced stable in School of Humanitarian Socionics. It is introverted and rational. TI and FI are both introverted rational functions. So, by definition, only TI and FI DOMs can have the BS mindset. In my humble, that reminds me of a nice piece of witticism by Paul White. So he moved from the WWE. This is a heck of a digression, Ben, but there is a link. He moved from the WWE, where it was called The Big Show, and he's gone to AEW. And on his shirt, because Big Show is like a trademark of WWE, and in AEW, All Elite Wrestling, a rival promotion, he is known by his real name, Paul White. And on his tracksuits and like ring wear, he has no BS, no Big Show. I thought that's a nice little pun there. In my humble opinion, a type prefers to stay in its mindset and so switches to and fro between its valued and unvalued mindset function. Now, that is an example of a sentence which I had to work on to get it clear. And even now, is it clear? A type prefers to stay in its mindset and switches to and fro between its valued and unvalued mindset function. And then you have to know what a mindset is.
I think so. The sentence prior is a little confused. Well, maybe it's two sentences prior. When you initially, in quotes, talk about balanced stable, this is the first time where I get
yeah. That's about sort of like putting stuff in for the people from Socionics. But as Carl Jung would say, the introverted rational types. You know, he's actually got the grouping by this in psychological types at the end of chapter 10. He's got now the Bollinger edition. The American edition will say the one that comes out in like volume 6 kind of works. It'll say something like summary of the extroverted rational types, extroverted irrational types, introverted rational types, introverted irrational types. So he has put them together in the mindset. Now Victor Galanka calls them temperaments, but I'm like, no, Kersey owns temperament, so I'm renaming it mindset. I'm an INTP. I'll rename stuff if I want to. I'm like Van der Hoop. Right. And I've even renamed his rename. So he goes from sensation to instinct, and I go from instinct to instincting. Right. And then another INTP will probably come along and change my terms as well. Right. A type prefers to stay in its mindset, touches the mindset, unvalued mindset. Enneagram 6, especially 641. INTP will switch between TI and FI more than E5 INTP. The author of this model Vaserlan resembles this. To me, FI is more important than FE, but I enjoy being an FE state more than being an FI state. Right. Right, there we go. I'll try and get this in. What I can try and do is I can make that a little bit sharper by actually if I did I do a whatnot? Actually, yes, if I open that up, I'm gonna, because it's quite small, the text, just to get an extra little bit of sharpness. Oh, that's not right. NITX model Vaserlan. Right. So this is going to be a. Right, I'm just going to switch to a different. I'm going to switch to a PDF file that will rescale. Share screen. Although last time I did this, I had a memory leak. So if everything goes wrong, that's not right. That's my process table. You see in the innards of my computer. What a privacy. Right, that one. Right. So, is that the right one? Oh, I don't think that's the right one. That's the other one. Darn it. One thing at a time. Window. No, that's it. That's it. NITX model Vaserlan. That should be it. Yes. Right. Right. This. Oh, oops. Oops. Oh, no. Right. Okay. Control minus. Control minus. Control minus. I'm going to get a memory leak. Uh-oh. I've got to close that. It's too risky.
You're freezing sometimes.
Hi, folks. I have returner. Did you feel for me, Alexis?
I filled 0%.
Oh, thank you. Your effing really is inferior.
Oh.
Thank you. Right then, so I might give this video for you to edit. Edit the gap out. Right, I'm not doing that again. Right, I'm not going to share a PDF and try and get fancy with the rescaling, and that's what's caused the memory leak. Right then. So thank you, being a trooper, for hanging on. So you basically just sat there with blank stuff on the screen. I'm going to have to try and excise it.
What happened was I left, and then I got an email from you, and I came back. But then I was in the background room.
Ah, right, okay. So you weren't able to fill if you wanted to. Okay, so I will take back my
Even if I had been able to, would I have? It's questionable.
Yeah, even if you were the best FE person in the world, you wouldn't have been able to do it because you weren't in it. Okay, I'll let you off. Right then. Right. I'll read this out. Let's see what sort of a preview of what it looks like. Okay. Is that?
I can see well enough.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Dr. Dario Nardi's cognitive processes assessment, found at keystocognition.com, showed the inferior function was almost always in the bottom half of the scores. Functions in slots 6 and 8, so that will be SE and FE for you. In this, I was going to name these blocks something snappier than that, but I couldn't find a better name. So basically, it's the situational countercolored functions. Bit of a mouthful, I know. Functions in slots 6 and 8 are opposite invertness from the default row and are part of the counterclub functions. Their weakness is unsurprising. So it's like they're twice as far away from your default, from your, in other words, these two here have the benefit of being default and part of your club. And then it sort of like balances out as to which one is stronger. Either this one because it's default or this one because it's valued. But the data would tend to show that most of the time TE is stronger in INTJs than TI, just because they value it more and they do it more. And the way INTJ uses TI, like very good at picking apart other people's arguments. So think of suggestible inferior SE, extroverted instinctor, tells in women NI Dom resemblers. We're going to get controversial here. They tend to be attracted towards manly men. Tendency for those women to dress in a post-feminist way. See Blake's 7th episode, The Harvest of Kairos. Did I show that to you?
Yeah, is that the one? It was like
yeah, and if she turned around, I would like you to do it again.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Right. That's sort of my stereotypical image of NI Dom females that we go like that. Especially NFJ. Now the thing is, the actual actress was like that in real life because they asked her about that relationship. I think she was INFJ in real life, Jacqueline Pierce.
See, and I very much like FP men, and I feel like that may not be considered manly men.
Well, SFP men, I suppose, but I see what you mean. Yeah, there is going to be it's like what I said before. Socionics might concentrate too much. In fact, it does concentrate too much on the assertive, aggressive aspects of SE. Whereas if we use our definitions in the West of SE, we might then be able to nuance these and say, well, it's not just the NJ females attracted towards those assertive, aggressive parts of SE. It might be other parts, those other SE traits, those other functions, like the ability to improvise and be calm in the moment, less aggressive, masculine-y, ESTP type of traits. because there are those differences in quadra values between, usually it's the NFJ females that will like the STP kind of SE, and the NTJ females are liking the SFP kind of SE, which is more kind of living in the moment and showing more of that instinctual feeling.
It's more of like I feel like it's more of an artistic kind of SE.
Yeah. So for example, the NTJ females might be more into like the male musicians.
Yeah, for sure.
See, I've tapped on something. All right, for sure. Right, your face lit up. Right, tendency for those women to dress in a post-feminist way. See plate 7 episode Harvest Carverse for NITX, SEFX, Servalan, Jarvik duality. Below is about TINX Vanderhoop integrating inferior FE into himself. Right, in Conscious Orientation, 1939, J.H. Vanderhoop wrote a polarity counter club in Model V can be integrated into the personality, e.g., a TINX, that's Vanderhoop's own type, we would call that INTP preferences. And here we go. But where there is a greater freedom in thought, we get a morality, and by that he meant conventional moral evaluation, so FE. We get a morality founded on principles and reason, capable of giving fresh insight into life and feeling. So he would say that his polarity and that he'd changed. That in Jungian terms, we might say that he's integrated his soul image, integrated the B side, fresh insight into the life and feeling. The effect of polarity in me gives rise to an interest. So, I mean, Vanderhoop, as an INTP, but who was a psychiatrist, would have developed his feeling side through his profession. Unfortunately, he died in 1950 in his 50s. So he actually died 11 years before Jung. The effect of polarity in me gives rise to an interest in feeling in its relation to instincts, knee sensation, I've interpolated. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling life as a sphere to itself and on the significance of morality. What I wonder is, the woman that translated this, Laura Hutton, I wonder if she was INTP. It would be interesting to know. Because it'd be the best person to translate an INTP as another INTP. The function in slot A is the least valued of the lot. It is the Achilles heel of the psyche, the weakest function and the most disliked in others. Can be conflict with others who resemble a type which has this function as its dominant. Usually the type avoids activities which draw on slot 8, but in some cases it can be binary, in the all or nothing, lacks appropriate degree sense. It tends to be totally avoided or used as a blunt instrument, usually without skill. E.g., an ESTJ, ESFJ resembler who makes rigid plans for the future, showing lack of nuance in intuition and development, NI. And then I show a comparison to the 1D functions in Model A. But slot 6, 1D in 80s, is greater than 7 in Model V, and slot 6 is greater than A in Model V. And then I did that thing last time about the tactical expediter. And then theoretical background, Kersey temperaments are artisan, SP, SE wheelhouse. I'll move the Guardian, SI wheelhouse, idealist NF, rational NT. So I will go, I can stay on there or I can go back to that order. So, Alexis, your overall thoughts on Model V. And I can actually, and maybe in the second part, find something wrong with it.
I don't know. I don't know if, I don't know if you're going to get me to find something wrong with the wording, the system, the precision, the accuracy. I think you're going to have a higher level of specification with that. I think the only place where I find issue with it is that for TE, it takes a long time to explain. And now I'm still kind of waiting to hear for the usability factor for personal growth, maybe like what the recommendations are, given that most of this to me doesn't seem new. It basically is just a better explanation of things I've already known. The only thing that seems new is maybe placing TI and NE above FI and SE.
Yeah, I mean, I am sort of going along with what is been sort of researched rather than making something up.
Right.
Right, you know,
Right,
I want to go with the truth rather than something that's completely different. I'm not Eric.
That's not a criticism, by the way,
No.
that there's not much new. It's just an observation.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And also going towards, might be the 6 in me, like going towards an authority, but wanting it also to be logical.
Yeah.
I suppose the new part is emphasizing the situational part. And also the energy aspect that I've imported for certain of the, like NE here, like this position here, that it's high in information, low in energy. And also the energy in that I sort of imported a bit from Socionics about the dabbling nature of FI. So it fits in what you've already learned. So, and I am prepared to say that there are going to be that people's own development is going to, like for instance, in my own type, FI is not 7th, in my opinion. But SE is certainly 8th. So if you were to rank your functions, if we were to just rank your intuiting functions, obviously you're going to say NI is. So out of your, do you agree with that order for your introverting functions?
In me, I think for the introverted functions, I would say NI, then FI, then TI, then SI.
Right. So you rather than preference, so you think you're better at FI than TI?
Oh, well, maybe I should clarify. Okay, I think I use FI more. I may not be better at it than TI. I definitely don't use TI as much as I use FI. It's so hard to judge skill level. I feel like with FI, I think I would have a tendency to incorrectly judge my skill level with TI.
Yeah, that's a feature of that function in that position. And especially ENTJs overestimating, especially ENTJ males overestimating their level of SE, puffing out their chests, being wannabe ESTPs.
Yeah.
And the ESTPs are laughing. Like you see it with that guy that used to do the advert where he was like outside a house, Ty Lopez.
Oh yeah.
But and then you see that other guy, the one who like the black guy, I think he's like ESTP. It's called like Benjamin or something. Like he's like really built and like he also sells NLP stuff.
I'm not sure.
It's just like something millionaire or something. And like he is like level and his body language is just like so at home in his skin. And his level of SE is so much more natural than Ty Lopez, who I just see as ENTJ. Yeah, he had that house behind it and he'd go in and have all his books in his garage. What? Who puts their books in the garage? Like, and then they found out that that wasn't his house. He just like rented it to make it look like he was really prosperous in order to sell it. Yeah, Ty Lopez, NLP guy, making NLP look bad. And then Benjamin, some millionaire. I won't get his name, but yeah, he's well built.
Yeah, I think like when I think about my use of TI, it feels painstaking. Like I have an ability to do it, but it just feels painstaking.
Yeah, and also it would be used. Oh, something I didn't. Oh yeah, I should have pointed that out. Type fish doesn't know it's wet with this function. INTJ fish doesn't know it's wet with TI. INTP fish doesn't know it's wet with NI. Yeah, I should have little bits trying to cram them in. So cram that fish is water. You swim in TI. So, but I'll try and get the whole thing in. So yeah, so.
What examples can you think of INTJs using TI?
Well, when they listen to a theory from an INTP and they're able to go, well, have you thought of this and this and this? And they find that the logical errors, the faults in people's reasoning, because the INTJ is not likely to use TI constructively to construct a theory unless it's part of their job, because their mindset is going towards a TE. But they can, like a Socionics nickname, Victor's nickname for INTJ is the critic, as they're going to find the errors. And or you might like the INTJ that checks somebody else's code, like and that finding of errors, sort of a negative kind of NI, is sort of a charges system in Victor Galenka that's so-so.
So you think INTJs would tend to use TI in an incomplete way that focuses on the negatives more so than the positives?
Yeah. Overall, they're a negativist, and it goes along with their image of, and it would be used incidentally with their, like I said, I think every time an INTJ is thinking and introverting, they're TIing, because I see them as dynamic mental verbs. So anytime they're thinking, and their thinking is very much subjective and their own thinking and very idiosyncratic and very subjective, that's got to be TI. There are certain things we associate with TI, such as like building of systems and that lot, but that's more of an end product to TI with NE, of NTP construction. TI can be used in other ways, like the way STPs use TI, where they use it with the ability to improvise in the moment and expediency. And so I think it lines up with the idea of NTJs are still utilitarian, thinking for themselves, following their own methods. I think NTJs are agnostic about, they don't care if it's somebody else's idea or their own idea. They'll sort of just do it if it works. Whereas I think with the TPs, and especially the NTP, I think with the TPs, I think all the TPs want to do it their own way for the sake of doing it their own way.
That's true. That's interesting. That's an interesting observation.
Do you agree with it? Do you think the TPs are doing it their own way for the sake of doing it their own way?
You know, I'm not a TP, but I would say as an observer, it does seem like that. And I could say that from the TJ side, it's like, I don't care who came up with it, really.
Yeah, exactly. NTJs just want the most efficient method. They don't care whether it's by the book or not.
I think TE would also like if I had came up with the idea, I would like the renown you get from others. But that's the only reason.
Yeah, that's in Kersey's, that they want the deference. The NTJs, the NTs want the deference. They want to be deferred to for the product of their strategic intellect. Okay, do you agree about the ranking of these four at the bottom?
Okay. Okay, so I agree TE first. I agree FE last. NE. I think. Well, okay, so I've now put in conscious effort to develop TE and SE because of other growth advice I had heard. Take me at like 18 before I had heard any of the growth advice. I think NE. Oh, well, this is still a case of I definitely use SE more at the current moment, but I probably don't. I may not use it. And it probably is the case that I use 5 and 6 more than 3 and 4, but I may be able to use 3 and 4 with higher skills.
I mean, I might argue that every type uses SE more than any other function, just because of the nature of the senses and paying attention. Like in this event, we've used SE.
Mm-hmm. Well, but the way I've described NI is like, it's like when you drive home and you forget how you don't remember the drive.
Yeah, Haley's mentioned that. You should watch my videos with Haley.
And it's It's like that all the time. So I don't think I use SE very much. Like if I'm in a sports game, I'm constantly zoned out and I have to force myself to come back and observe senses because otherwise I miss the ball and stuff.
Right. But you said when you were in a sports game, when you were actually playing a game, so you are doing some SE.
Well, you have to do body movement, I suppose, to function.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like taking in sights and sounds and smells or whatever, it's like I just shut off. So I'll be standing there let's say I'm playing volleyball and I'm waiting for the serve to come over, and I'll just be standing there and I'm completely zoned out, not taking in senses. And then the ball may drop beside me and I realize I need to pay attention. And so then I keep myself up and I'm like, I need to pay attention.
Yeah, that's the example of like you having like the default, by default, going inside your head, and then situationally, as Jung would have said, that's your passive extroverting when the ball whacks you on the nose. It's like, now I better extrovert. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I would argue from a developmental point of view, and this is your main, Kersey wrote about the INTJ. Every idea is subjected to the test of usefulness.
Yeah.
So this is now being subjected to the test of usefulness. So I would say, especially for the abstract types, that this will develop your intellect. So that, because the TI and NE, in my opinion, is correlated to these roles, these intellect roles of constructor. And so you've got your coordinator, and then you've got your constructing. Now, for you, that might be constructing arguments for your vlog, or
right,
for advice for people, and putting it into a form of, because you are. So, in how long have you been into typology?
7 years.
Right. So you'll have developed your own theories and thoughts, and come up with your sort of your own theories. Not, but again, that's like the role, like getting into the role of. But even somebody like Dario, as an INTJ in typology, usually he's sticking with the data and he doesn't want to like elaborate into. So, for instance, so this model is mostly consistent with Dario, but he doesn't would then put it into an elaborate model because he wants to stick more with, because in reality these things can move around a bit. Depending on it. So, for instance, you can have some people who have FI, say third, but you can get INTJs who have FI third in their preference, and I might argue female INTJs are more likely to have FI third than fifth,
based on development.
Yeah, just based on development and social experience and expectations, things like that. And then also like INTJ that may be in a field that draws on NE, where like maybe they're expected to brainstorm or actively sort of search out possibilities. What was did they have like an ENTP father or something, or ENTP mother? What kind of function was being drawn out? Or say you got an INTJ and they had an ISTP parent that didn't like the NE.
Which I did have an ISTP. So my dad's an ISTP, my mom's an ISFJ.
Right, well, there's a difference there. So ISTPs is not going to like NE. ISTP does not get on well with the NFP. Does that match your experience?
That's my sister. So you just named my family. So right. My sister's an ENFP.
Did you notice communication difficulties between your sister and your father?
Yeah, it's. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I think that is one of those, what I would say is a double conflictor, where the opposites in Kersey and opposite in Socionics. So opposite in terms of functions, and opposite in Kersey in terms of opposite temperament.
Right.
In terms of ST versus NF. And opposite interaction style, where ENFP is get things going. So expressive and informing, and ISTP is directive and reserved. No. So yeah, I think those two conflict. So I think STPs really conflict with NFPs, and I think INTJ really conflicts with ESFJ. ESFJ basically wants a facial expression of INTJ. They want some kind of like feedback that they're okay.
It never occurred to me until I learned about type, and just never occurred to me that people would change their facial expression for other people.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my.
Yeah.
It's like I'll make a facial expression that I'm feeling.
Yeah, authentic. INTJ is authentic to a fault. The most authentic of all the types. Right, that's an example though. When you compare INFP to INTJ, that the INFP is considering how their values a little bit more land with other people up to a point. I think there's a certain threshold, and then the INFP will lay it out. But they are considered as like part of that diplomatic intellect. So I would say that these 4 functions, these NT functions, correlate to the strategic building intellect that Kersey saw that the NTs were best at, strategic building. So the constructing, like, would you agree that NTPs are good at constructing theories and models?
Mm-hmm.
And so by that, we can sort of make the assumption that that correlates with the wheelhouse functions of NTP, which are NE and TI, the valued. And so I would say growth, and again, unsung allies. Your unsung allies are TI and NE. They will help you. And,
yeah, you know what I think about, like, with my YouTube channel, the most common criticism that I get, in my opinion, is people criticizing my TI not being as well developed as it could. Like, I try not to say incorrect things, but a lot of times people will criticize that I left out information, or a word choice wasn't a good word choice.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened back to a video and I've like misspoken and just made a complete, just like, and I said Model G instead of Model V, and just speakos. Maybe, and then, but I do think that it gets a little bit. I would also say that for, let's have a look at a concrete type, because these break the clubs to a certain extent. Let's look at ISFJ, because you know that type. ISFJ down here, an accommodator. Let's just get all the guardians. Oh, actually, let's try and get the whole thing in. So here, where you've got the club here of SI, FI, FE, and SE, and that though would actually break between 2 intellects in Kersey. The FE and the SI related to logistical provider, you know, like actually physically taking care of people's like bodily needs, providing and protecting. And so naturally your ISFJ mother would have been very good at that, and inclined towards it. And ENTJ females would find that the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
That role, that protector role. And then we've got these functions, though, FI and SE, that Kersey would associate with more of the informing half of the tactical manipulating intellect. So he would say that there's a bias towards the creative versions of those, in terms of, like, you know, so many ESFPs are wannabe thespians, wannabe musicians, that sort of thing. And such a high percentage of musicians and thespians are SFPs. I personally think Noel Gallagher. Have you heard like any of the Oasis songs?
I don't think so.
Okay, you might like them. There's some very well written songs, but I think Noel Gallagher's ISFP. I'm pretty darn sure that Pat Patterson, who I've read 5 of his books on songwriting, I think he's ISFP. He's always talking about prosody and how everything must be integrated. It's like, this guy does not like NE. He would not like a Pet Shop Boys song. Tell me, have you heard of the Pet Shop Boys?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. NE, right, okay. ENFP, I think. Right. I'm not gonna hum any of their tunes. I'm a terrible hummer. If I could, I would. No. If I could, well, I would. So, but there we've got, and I mentioned before that sometimes you'll get ESFJ will entertain, because it's like for FE reasons, because it makes them feel good, but it also makes think like ESFP feel good as well. It's like, so it's those. So there are some ESFJ thespians. I agree with the Socionics people, some Socionics people, that Dwayne Johnson's ESFJ, The Rock. I think The Rock is ESFJ. What do you reckon?
That's what my husband and I, this maybe a month ago, we were just kind of talking to ourselves. We said probably ESFJ.
Yeah, and he's involved, and he's like performing, and like even when he was wrestling. So I think that and so there's some overlap between, but the temperament differences, like something you can get ISFJ that is into, but it tends to be as a hobby rather than a career because it's not safe. Where the ISFJ can get into crafts, can write some poetry. So again, with that introverting sense and that introverting feeling, but again, they wouldn't do it as a career as much unless it was like a family tradition, or maybe you could get SJs that become artists. Like if it's like a stable career, they'll go into it. So there's some overlap there, but you've got the temperament differences. So, for instance, with NTJs, there's not the temperament differences between NTJ and NTP because they're both rationals, both NTs. But with SFJs and SFPs, you've got a difference in temperament. So they can sometimes cross. And I think with STJs and STPs, like STPs can do some STJ stuff. Like I've known of an ESTP that's been an accountant and did it in an ESTP way. And it didn't end well. but the ESTP was very capable of doing the job. So STJs, so there is some overlap there in that it's both sort of like technical but sensory stuff, the ST stuff, like physical practical knowledge, like repairing machinery, or like actual where you're applying yourself to getting jobs fixed on a physical level in sort of the near term. STJs and STPs can do it. They just go about it in different ways. And it's like STJs by the book, STPs by their own experience and what's in front of them. Although they would have learned from experience, though, after messing up a number of times, I better go by the man, there's like, what's that first instinct? Because part of the ego of the TP to do it their own way, and even if they F up, to like, or maybe do it and to find out the level of experience. And I suppose as they get older, STPs are sort of going by their own book in terms of because of their experience and hands-on learning, and learning from things from the way certain people learn. I think that the guy who wrote the book Shot by Shot, Stephen D. Katz, might be artisan. And those people and Dario wrote that artisans learn by doing. Because I sort of like that hands-on learning. So there's some overlap there. I just think there's more overlap with the abstract types because the clubs are the same as the temperaments for the abstract types. It's just that the importance of this huge difference in instinct between guardians and artisans. Yeah, and I go along with that. I've seen that. I do think there is that big just that big difference of so the difference in instinct between ISFJ and ISFP, where ISFP is more likely to take risks, ISFJ more conservative, more about other people's feelings and fitting in, belonging, other people's needs. ISFP can also be very kind, and so you can have SFP nurses. And something Carol Linden once talked to me about, she had a friend who became a nurse, and that the SFP nurse is more likely to be better in, say, the emergency room, because that fits what the artisan is good at, being calm under pressure, and the level of excitement and stimulation. Whereas, so you can see there's those high pressure environments where people have to think really quick. is, and like I said, surgeon, fighter pilot, you want an STP for that, because they're for that quick thinking, instinctive, not semi-instinctive, because you've also got like all the years of training behind them, and like 100 hours of like flying each year to train them up, so it becomes semi-instinctual. Like Dibley goes on in like long distinctions between habit and instinct, and like habit, you can lose your habit but you don't lose the instinct, and him saying things like, and he actually at one point Dibley compares, it's an interesting thing about instinct, he compares the instinct of a bird to build a nest with a young couple having a house, and the difference being that the human beings have more sort of executive control over their instinct and how they implement it, but the bird is pretty much running the program of, and there's things like in bird, and the mentioned for the bird in that book Mind and Brain about the bird is responding to a bit of yellow a bit of red in the mouth, and like when it does that, it does the behavior, and so it's like this almost like reflex level stuff. And again, there's a little bit that you get that stuff like that with humans, again, spiders and snakes, these atavistic fears. And so now, I think you agree with the disdained row? Yeah, those ones are disdained, and then it's just a case of, well, Ben, I'm not so sure if these are in front of these.
Yeah, it's just a matter of
okay, let's think of your mother. Let's think of, did you say your father was ISTP? Right, okay, let's think of your father. Let's get ISTP here. I'll just put that on there for a moment. There. So think of his SI and his TE. Was his TE better than his FE? Or is his TE better than his FE?
I think his TE is better than his FE, but it's just like the same thing I guess I've already said. Maybe he's more likely to use his FE.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like backseat driver. It's that voice in the head of, and so one of the things I might say about INTJ is, so what I might say to you is that you might have a lot of ideas might occur to you, but you ignore them.
Yeah.
You're running it through the filter of usefulness. Not useful, gone. Potentially, now you put yourself in a situation where, say, where those ideas, or put yourself in a situation where, I've got to come up with ideas for new videos. Then you're going to start listening to your backseat driver.
That's true. That's true.
So this is where, again, the social field, because it's like you use functions for two reasons. One, because you prefer them, or because the situation is drawing on them.
Yeah. So,
and that's where the intellect, the idea of the intellect will probably come in. So
okay, so my whole thing with Myers-Briggs or whatever, or cognitive functions, is that I just want to be the best version of myself. I feel like I can pretty competently or confidently say NI's pretty much developed. And I can pretty much say FE and SI suck right now in myself. So for the first 3 years I knew about, more than that. Maybe the first 5 years I knew about cognitive functions. I really worked on TE and I tried to emulate ENTJs. And I tried to get around ENTJs and like act like them and talk like them or whatever, be like them. And in doing so, I tried to decrease FI. Or just, I tried to call upon it less often. And then maybe in the last year and a half, I've tried to work on SE just by putting myself in more SE situations. Yeah, like sporting events, for example.
So you're going towards your, what Socionics would say, your valued quadra functions. Because SFPs and NTJs all value NITE, FI, and SE. This is going to be a tendency for people to want to develop their B side of their personality. And this, I think again, growth. It's about a discipline thing. I think it's good for people to develop that column because it will balance out. Pardon?
I don't see what you're referring to.
Sorry about that. Yes, the green column, unsung allies growth.
Yeah, so it takes like it'd be good for me to develop 3 and 4, but may not be as enjoyable and would take discipline.
Yeah, it's not going to be enjoyable. It's not enjoyable for INTPs to develop TE, but they have to do it unless they're going to be that philosopher. Like the way there's like always INTPs after that philosopher job, they got to do that. Like I said, think of the number of INTPs in science and computing. They've got to be using TE.
Oh man, that sounds so. That would just. Man, this does not seem enjoyable. Okay, so, but I'm willing to do it. It just doesn't sound enjoyable. So, what do you think if you, there are too many variables here. So, for me, with NITE.
I'll give you an example how you might use TI. So, when you're doing you're 5, aren't you, Alexis?
Mm-hmm.
5, 6, 6. So, when you're reading something through and you're reading how, say it's a procedure of how to do something. And then it's like you're gonna you'll stop and you'll think, well, actually, and then you'll start, well, I think, and then when you start getting into your opinion of it, your subjective interpretation of somebody else's like TE, and you're going, well, actually, I think, and I disagree. I think you should do it like this. Well, then that's your subjective thinking, coming in play. It's just that you can't. It's hard to see that. You're in it all the while. Basically, I would say you are swimming in an ocean of thinking for yourself.
Yeah. Do you think there's a certain age at which it becomes easier to develop certain functions?
Yeah, I mean, like, people are going to live in their first function and develop their second one. And then, as I said last time, it depends on the environment. Also the family, like what roles. Like, for instance, think of an INTP female that had an upbringing outdoors and doing lots of like outdoorsy activities. And so she then develops and becomes a little bit more ENTP-ish. And she has like stronger SE than a more, say, sheltered INTP.
Yeah.
I mean, say she might have had parents that got her to do lots of physical stuff as well, outdoors. Or those parents that make their kids do certain sporting things. Or they might have had a parent like, no, you're doing this martial art. And it's like, and they make them do it. It's to your own good. You're either doing this martial art or no boys. They might even say stuff like, I'm 8 years old. I'm not interested in boys. They're smelly. I'm thinking ahead. All right. Right.
So I have tried. So I think I have worked on developing TE and SE. Where do you think I should go next?
I suggest, but I'm biased, NE, because and have phases where it's like when I would say for that is not to chase those ideas. But what they would say, what they actually suggest is to writers, if you have an idea for something, write it down, file it away. It'll be useful in future. And so again, if you have an idea for a future project, write it down, file it away. Don't let it distract you, get in the way of the NTJ-ness, but file it away and come back to it in future. Because usually NE is a source of distraction, and it's going to have a low. It's almost like a low bullet deadliness quotient. Like 1 out of 500 bullets might be useful. So it's like you have a load of ideas, but like write down the good ones and then come back to it. I'm not saying that ideas are NE. It's just that NPs tend to have a lot of ideas. And I think part of the reason for that is because they're interested in a lot of things, they tend to cross-fertilize between lots of different areas and find connections between these areas. I mean, for me to make connections between Socionics and Vanderhoop and Jung, I have to know about those in the first place. Whereas INTJ is more likely to focus on one area and go deep. So I once joked to Haley that NTPs in comparison to NTJs can be a mile wide and an inch deep. Whereas the NTJs are like to focus on one area and deep dive. Now, again, depending on the social field, that can be better or not. So, yeah, I would say for your vlogging, you get an idea for a video, write it down. It might not fit at the moment, but it might fit. If it might fit next year. You might have an idea for a video. Oh, I don't know any of these people. Oh, I could do this, say, a video with somebody who is like this type, and then talk to a person that's like that. I might do a series of, you know what I mean? Like, you might do a video. I have an idea for a video. Oh, how does FI vary between SFPs and NFPs? Oh, I could do a video where we compare them, saying, like, write it down, do it next year. And it's like just having this, like, backlog of ideas. And then when you're stuck for an idea, then look back at those ideas. And then I think you're using TI in a critical way to pass through and evaluate other people's thoughts. You don't need to use it in a constructing way unless you're constructing something that's going through the filter of, is this useful to actually construct this thing? But you are constructing arguments, made this structure, the constructure of a video, or maybe like, or maybe in future you wish to do a course and you want to plan out a course. So,
yeah, it's like construct my own arguments versus destructing other people's.
Yeah, but again, it's still going to go through the filter of what is useful. Whereas NTPs are doing it for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Like David Mark Kersey could come up with an information theory that is like going to solve problems in physics, but he's getting on a bit. He's in his 70s, and he's working on the big, like just doing it for the sake of it. So after, okay, so let's say theoretically I did some NE stuff. Would I then theoretically do work on TI? Now I would also say, so I think I mentioned this before, that developing these is better for your career, and developing FI and SE is better for your personality by developing your B side. But you're going to get that developed anyway because of your husband, because he's going to be like showing you these functions, and just the being in a quadra relationship with someone from the opposite side of the quadra, you all value the same functions. You're helping each other with those functions by being examples for each other, role models for each other with those functions. So you can ask him about FI stuff and SE stuff, and the same, and vice versa. And then again, so that's how I sort of see it. It depends how you, because I buy into the idea of the Kersey intellects corresponding with the functions, with function pairs. So it would be.
I think this is useful.
Yeah, if you need to do some constructing, and if it's useful, it's probably useful by association, by being associated with Kersey, because his intellects are useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think at some point I should ever try to develop SI and FE?
How old are you, Alexis?
24, 25.
Okay, that's okay. So if you became a parent, I think you're going to develop SI. You're going to do just the role, especially for mother. You got to do SI stuff. Although, as I said with Jeff, single father, he had to do SI protecting stuff when he was like bringing up his son Morgan, and he's talked about this openly in videos. So that would really develop your SI. but you're still going to probably do it in an INTJ way. So Amanda's, so if you think of an INTJ foster parent, because I do know someone who had an INTJ, like she would like maybe tough love with the kids that she was fostering. But yeah, that will develop. And again, it's the sub-functions of SI. What kind of SI are we talking about? The kind of SI which you're not going to change your mindset and go from rational, where you're utilitarian and you want to do things your own way, to suddenly wanting to fit in with everybody else and doing it in the traditional way, the by the book way. You're not going to develop that kind of SI because it goes against your temperament. What you might do is then look at the traditional way, the by the book way of doing it, and from a TE point of view, I might go, well, actually, there's something to this, or I can sort of see the benefit of this, but you're still going to go with your temperament. The other parts of SI, in terms of, is it worth developing an attention to health and internal bodily harmony? Yes. ENTJs really need to learn that, because you see an ENTJ who's 40 and they look in their 50s. They've just worked themselves. The other part of SI, is it worthwhile developing, say, their imaginative abilities and maybe reading some novel? I mean, do you read novels, Alexis?
Not really, no.
Yeah. Well, it depends if you're in a career where you're allowed to develop your SI, your sensory imagination, whether that would be useful. But I would definitely say the SI part of taking care of yourself more than is and attention, because once, say, you did enact the role of mother, which overlaps a lot with the role of protector, which is why ISFJs of very good at that role, naturally fall into it, is that the role drawing on their SI and FE wheelhouse functions is that you were then going to, your attention is like, as Jeff said, his attention was on caring for somebody else and logistical needs and getting into that SFJ mindset. So that would be useful for that.
Yeah.
But as you said, many NTJ females are choosing not to become parents. So yeah, it depends on what the role, what is drawn on. But just from a health point of view, yeah, it depends. Yeah, but again, it fits with it being disdained. I think I've done the assertive kind, the imagine, and the harmonizing kind. Yeah, I'll do that for the body. Yeah, but generally you're not, because it's so far against, especially INTJ, which is like the most awkward type in wanting to do things their own way and like not caring what other people think unless they're close to them. Then it's like, but there will, like I said, with the sub-functions thing, I think maybe use certain sub-functions over other ones. I think you will end up using the harmonizing sub-function of SI. The internal physical harmony, attending to others' needs, maybe, depending on if life draws on that in you. And so that's why people tend not to develop these, as Dario said, these ones are least preferred. And that's in line with the research. Right then. So it might be me saying, hey, well, should we finish the video? unless you got anything else to say. No, maybe what you could say is like, maybe link this on your channel.
Oh yeah, say, hey. I did follow your suggestion about making a playlist of the channels I'm featured on. So our first video is on that playlist. Excellent. And I'll add this one as well.
So what you could do a little video. Hey, for everybody out there who doesn't like my TI, you INTPs, watch this guy.
I've been thinking that throughout this video. I was like, I agree with everything Ben says. I can sign off on what Ben says, but Ben's so much more accurate than I am. So for people that are so incredibly accurate and precise, I'm like, this is a good person to send them to, because I just such a hard time.
Yeah. Pardon?
I was going to say, I have such a hard time.
Oh, right, okay.
Being precise enough. I just want to get to the point and
it's like when they asked Newton, how did he come up with his theories, and like he said, the reason I was able to see so far is that I was standing on the shoulders of giants. And this is, again, it's Jung, Socionics, Dario, Vanderhoek, and taking it all in and adding a little bit of my own subjective factor, but not wanting to create something completely different and unique for the sake of it. The idea of having a model that is simpler than Model G and explains things and is pretty solid enough in that the organized, and again, going back to the organizing principles of default versus situational. Do you buy into that? That you use your extroverting function situationally, and by default, certainly with your NI, you're going in there. And I would say a lot of the time you would be an NI and FI. Just because of your preference for as your default valued functions. And then it becomes debatable about, like with these, like when we're comparing these two. Well, that one's default and it's a club function, but it's not valued. But this one's valued and it's a club function, but it's not default. But as you said, you actually actively trained yourself up to get better at TE. Because you probably weren't doing much TE because you were doing so much introverting.
Yeah, it was definitely passive TE when I was using TE.
Yeah. And then with SE, where it's so far away from your natural that you value it, but so in my system, one-dimensional, you value it, but it's not a club function. It's not an NT function. It's an SF function. It's part of your counter club, and it's not default. So it's like it's down here, but you value it, and it's like trying to develop it, suggestible for it, suggestible inferior. And then Vanderhoek would say that eventually, if you integrate that and become aware of it, it becomes your counter nucleus, or your polarity. And again, so the operating mode, default situational, valued, unvalued comes from Socionics. And I would say clubs, even the idea of clubs, like NT, NF, SF, ST, that comes from Socionics. And all that stuff, remember with Dario, like going through all of the evidence and Dario banging on, like all of that, like hammering home the point. And then Vanderhoek going on about, like, and he's got the clubs there. So it's like, it's not like an idea, like in Socionics, they'll have this thing, they'll say, this function's accepting, this function's producing. How do you know? It's like, but this is based on, it's data. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like the idea of the clubs, it's out there. Dario's data, it's out there. And then the idea of winding up, the idea of, again, valued, unvalued, default, and club. And that becomes sort of the organizing principles of it. And I think a benefit of this model is, if people look at it, is that they will get to like understand verting as Jung intended.
Yeah,
because I'm pretty much building on that idea of I think so, as Jung intended, in that extroverting is empiricalizing, again, subjectifying. So when you're having your subjectifying, internalizing thoughts, you're using TI there. It's just that we tend to associate TI. There's like an NTP bias of what we think of TI as that theoretical building of models kind of thing. And even Vanderhoek himself put will to systematization. Well, that's really INTP. The other TPs are not as systematic. ENTP is somewhat systematic, I suppose, but ESTP, tactically they can be. But it's more, you have to look at that. And one of the things from Kersey, and I would suggest you'd get more utility is actually reading Kersey. So I can send you the PDF. And then you can buy the book.
Yeah. I really need to buy the book.
Again, rolling that Kersey, very useful in HR. And so what I reckon, I would like somebody else to talk about Kersey on YouTube, apart from me and Jeff. So if you could talk about a load of stuff that's useful in terms of people's careers and role enactment, and you could talk about video for NFs, and you could say, or you could say how to develop these various roles, these socially significant roles which correspond to function pairs, and so you could almost say, well, I can tell you how to get better at this role, and this role is used in and give examples of it. So you can say the role of mobilizer. You can say, well, if you need to coordinate something, if you're working on a project, if you're directing something, you're thinking months ahead.
Yeah.
And there's going through these various roles, and to me, this is the social plane of the functions, but they're not functions in isolation. Like I said before, you got the SFJs using FE with SI to physically supply people, the way your mother used FE. Although again, that's the role as well. Even if she was a different type, the role is drawing on those activities of the protector role, and then the way NFJs use FE for someone's mental health, and with the NI and the psychological interest that NFs have.
Yeah.
So again, that's a social correlate. That's something that we can point to. When people don't believe in functions, we can say, yes, but if you believe in the whole types and the Kersey temperaments, these correlates to these intellects and these actions that we can see, and the way it plays out, you can sort of TI it and say, well, it all lines up with the function pairs.
Right.
And also
do you have a PDF of your model V?
I have a PDF. Yes, I do. I'm not going to open it at the moment because it might crash.
Right.
If I try to share the screen. But yes, I have. Yeah, I can send you. I think I might have sent you it before, but I'll send it again.
Yeah, I think you've sent it to me before. But I'm wondering, like, if someone watched like a INTP video, I picked a random type. Do you link it in the description?
I've got a link to my. What I say is, I've got a link to my flow page, and on my flow page there's a link to a PDF that has all of the model. In fact, we can actually climax on that by actually showing you what I link on my page. Recently, I did it. I actually got a little bit of tea in there, forced myself, listen to the backseat driver. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show my browser, and then people are going to be able to see which websites I visit. Oh no, he visits Amazon and the Met Office. How groundbreaking. Oh, he's got an SY folder. What's that? Which StreamYard? Anyway, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to
Thesaurus. You have the thesaurus linked up there?
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just this is such an NTP thing to do because your precise word choice.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I was looking at that when I was thinking about operating mode and like, was mode or is it field? I was trying to get precision. I suppose that's TI with FE. That's TI with FE. Thinking about people, will they understand it? Get it precise. Right.
That's what I should do. Maybe I should have. That's a good way to TI stuff. I can have a thesaurus to help me.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's just. I think it's just. There it is. Just that thesaurus.com. Yeah, because I was looking at like the field and like mode and all of these different things. So yeah, I'm going to go to I recently changed the name of my YouTube channel because I was losing subscribers. I was flatlining because instead of putting Wilmer's Housemates by Ben Vaserlan, I can put Ben Vaserlan and Wilmer's Housemates. Then eventually that'll be up there. There should be. So I think I'll put it on here. There's part 1. Oh, one more. Never mind that. So, Alexis' channel. Did I put out Ben's social media links, especially Facebook groups? Actually, I should change that to what I did it recently. Flow page. Flow my flow page group bends. Now, what I changed it to was right. I should change it. Here we go. Inside the inner workings. There shouldn't be anything embarrassing here, but so what I should do is change this to now, so I don't make a cock up. I'm gonna ends downloadable Model V graphics, and I've put that in a lot of videos. Recently, I made the change where I put a lot of that in a pinned comment, so people can actually get there. And then I'm gonna go people can go through the process. So, in fact, maybe I need to. What I should do, maybe I should need to put you up there. Would you be all right if I put me up there and put you below? Like,
okay. You're fine. I don't care.
Right. Again, flow code. So people go to that page, and then again, first act. People want to get there. It's free, and then all Model V skeletal profiles, and that's the ones you've been looking at. Again, all of them whiteboards.
What do you mean skeletal?
Well, it's skeletal because, or skeletal, because they are not yet fully complete. Because I aim to like really fill them up with a load of text so that they look something more like this. Actually, let me get INTJ on there. INTJ. So it looks something more like this. So this, I originally, because I remember I said that I had help with Model G, and you are developing your NE, aren't you, Alexis? Because like we've developed this video into 2.5 hours. Right, so I'm going to be putting little bits in. So compared to this, it's skeletal. I'm going to be adding little bits of text for how they actually use the function. But I'm going to do it in 4 paragraphs. Core function, assertive, creative, stroke, imaginative, and then harmonizing. 4 paragraphs for each block.
Okay.
Eventually I'll get there. And then that'll be the super duper finished version.
Man.
Well, that's up to us to decide, super duper. Right. So you can see how I recycled the graphics. Right. Again, more complex Model G. And it thinks that, and of course, in the personal row, so in Model G, it only uses it at closer psychological distance. Well,
I have a TE comment actually.
Yeah, go on then.
Sorry, this is interjecting. Okay, so when I first look at this is a different draft, I know, but when I first look at this whole document, if I was just a user and I hadn't watched your videos, I'm kind of like, where am I supposed to go first? In what order am I supposed to read things that make sense?
Yeah, especially this one, because it's less, it's pretty like, it's like, why is Essie over here? Why it's harder for people to, because I've been like teaching this for like since like 2015, and like I realized that it is quite dense, and there's lots of bits like these having low energy. But again, NE, but I talk about it being, it's number 4.
It's almost
Model V.
It's almost like it would be almost better served as if you took this document and you put it into a Google slide, and things would appear as you go. Like if you had some animations in there, so it would appear.
Well, I mean, this. Yeah, well, this is Model G, and Model V by comparison is I've tried to make, based on my experience of teaching Model G, I think it's easier to teach. I think it's easier to teach Model V because we can say, look, we've got in green valued your NI, your T, your FI, your SE. You've got like most people who are watching the video would already know that. And then I have to convince them. I don't have to do much convincing of INTJs that FE is their weakest. And then also it's like the roughly like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in terms of strength. In terms of like getting that rough on average, it's going to be in that order, especially like these 1 and 2, these 7 and 8, and then these debatable. Although I would say that most times this is going to be pretty low down here, the inferior function. That's what the data would suggest. It's just that these 3 probably move around a little bit depending on the individual. Oh, and it's hard for someone to judge this. It depends on the kind of function it is. So, for instance, if you were talking to any NTP or any STP, and you're talking about how they use TE and go through it, it's like, yeah, I get loads of stuff done. I rock. They might say, especially ESTP. Right. So, I think maybe we should wind up. Right, and then overall,
I just feel like TE wise, there's got to be a faster way to explain this. We've since explained this in approximately, with this video and the last video, 3 hours and 42 minutes, and there's got to be a faster way to do it.
Well, I am going to get there. I am going to get there, and that is when I do the because I did them on my channel. If you watch my whiteboard videos, now it's for Model G. If you watch my INTJ whiteboard video, I explain it in about half an hour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to do the detailed graphic of, say, ESFJ. And then after I've done the detailed graphic and boiled it down into 4 bullet points, then I'm going to be doing it. And I'll say about 4 things for each one. And then it's just going to be with the whiteboard in about half an hour. Those did well for Model G. And I think those might do well for Model V. But I have to do all of that, like, again, tip of the iceberg, where it's like you get to a point where it's easier to explain by going through all of the work beforehand.
I think it's a very good concept. I just think that the barrier of this being 3 hours and 40 minutes weeds out a lot of people, even interested people.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed with the watch time and the views of the whiteboards. And so I get it down to about half an hour. Should actually be a bit less because there's not the complications of Model G. I should maybe 20 minutes. I could get it down to do a whiteboard on INTJ.
Sure.
So
especially, I've noticed on certain videos, I'll have like an ENTJ video, and then I'll get comments that are like, "You didn't get to the point in 20 seconds, so I'm gone."
Yeah, I'm off on a project. And then you could reply, well, what are you doing here anyway? Shouldn't you be conquering the world? Right, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to end the broadcast and then maybe set something up for another time about subfunctions. Right, so I'm going to end this, folks.